Adam, as has been said, was placed by God in the paradise of pleasure, or Garden of Eden. The garden man was to dress and keep as an agreeable occupation rather than a laborious task, and abundant scope was given for gratifying every lawful taste. Of every tree of paradise thou mayest eat. Yet to remind him that he had a master, a restraint was laid upon his appetite and self-will. Of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. But despite the awful penalty by which it was enforced, our first parents allowed themselves to transgress the law. Deceived by Satan, the chief of the fallen angels, who addressed her under the form of the serpent, Eve took of the forbidden fruit and did eat and gave to her husband, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened. They began to perceive the disorder of rebellious nature, and conscious of their sin, they tried to hide themselves from God's presence among the trees in the garden. But the Lord summoned them before him to hear their sentence. The woman was made subject to her husband and condemned to bring forth her children in sorrow. Man was doomed to a life of toil, and both were put in mind of death, which awaited them at a future day. Dust thou art, and into dust thou shalt return. They were then driven out of the paradise of pleasure, and cherubim, armed with flaming swords, were stationed at the entrance to prevent their return. Thus did our first parents, by their disobedience, lose the state of primitive innocence and grace, bring a train of spiritual evils into the world, and doom themselves with their posterity to misery and death. God, however, would not leave our first parents without hope, and divine justice was tempered with mercy. The very curse pronounced upon the serpent, which the devil made use of to deceive the woman, contained the promise of a Redeemer. Thou art cursed above all the beasts of the earth, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. She shall crush thy head, and thou wilt lie in wait for her heel. Here we have the first prophecy of the Messiah. To the woman God promises that of her shall one day be born a Savior, who after suffering from the malignity of the serpent, or devil, shall destroy his works and power, rescue man from the slavery of sin, and become to all that obey him the cause of eternal salvation.